Hello, my name's Bev and I'm the author of the book Please Eat, A Mother's Struggle to Free Her Teenage Son from Anorexia, which describes our family's battle with the deadly eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, which my teenage son Ben developed back in 2009 when he was just 15 years old. In this recording, I look back at two posts which I wrote on the same day on the 13th of January 2011, the month I began to write my blog, and a couple of years after my son Ben began to suffer from anorexia. And this first blog post, written on the 13th of January 2011, is called Anorexia, More Comparisons with a Year Ago. Telling Ben about this blog, he said, "Why don't you write about last night's evening meal?" which he cooked as a surprise for me. Eating disorder experts recommend that you keep the sufferer out of the kitchen and away from food preparation and planning. 1 year ago, had anorexic Ben been permitted to cook dinner, he would have done it to micromanage exactly what went into the meal, removing all traces of fats, oils and other enemies. We would have ended up with something very low calorie and dry. One of his anorexia-fueled party pieces before he was banned from the kitchen was to see how much he could decalorize recipes to come up with something ultra-low-calorie and fat-free and usually pretty tasteless, but which he, fueled by the anorexia, would label as healthy. Strictly, while he is still recovering from anorexia, Ben is banned from meal preparation, but is permitted to bake cakes, breads, biscuits, etc., now that he is reasonably okay about cooking with oils and fats. But last night's meal was cooked as a surprise for me. I smelled bacon cooking and realised that something was up. Now that the anorexia is reducing, Ben says he enjoys cooking in a way he would never have done a year ago. Also, he was relaxed enough to ensure that the calorie total came to quite a few hundred calories. It was the benchmark we used for evening meals, even including 2 tablespoons of oil and some bacon. Then, as he usually does these days, he ate the meal without any problems. Continuing the comparison with a year ago, when the anorexia was at its height, I asked him about when he used to down tools at meal times, ranting and raving if things weren't micro-perfect. He said, "When the anorexia was strong, because I was taking in calories at meal times, those calories had to be absolutely perfect in every way. If they weren't perfect, no matter how small the issue, the anorexia would make me freak out. The outburst wasn't because the meal was imperfect. It was me being annoyed with myself for being affected by the fact that things weren't perfect. I was angry with the anorexia. Now that the anorexia thoughts are quieter, I'm much more relaxed about eating and actually enjoy it for all the right reasons, like a normal person. I don't even mind if things aren't perfect. For example, the carrot cake I baked the other day was a bit soggy. A few months ago this would have freaked me out, and it would have resulted in him banging and crashing around, maybe smashing something. This is because the anorexia would tell me that I'd taken in fatty food that wasn't absolutely perfect. In the high anorexia days, I couldn't handle that, but now I'm much more relaxed about it." That's the end of that blog post, and it demonstrates how things were improving as we gently encouraged Ben to make changes, and he actually challenged himself behind the scenes to make changes too, because he was desperate to recover and overcome the anorexia. And the next entry, which I write on the same day, is called "The Anorexia Gets Weaker," and it goes like this. When the anorexia was at its height, before he was banned from the kitchen, Ben would spend ages preparing food. He would ritualistically chop dried and fresh food into tiny pieces and eat a diet which scarcely changed from one day to the next, behaviour that is common with anorexia sufferers. Over the next year, he felt compelled to eat his meals at certain times and eat the food in a certain order. Even when we were refeeding to gain the weight lost by the anorexia during the first few months of treatment with CAMS, his meals were still pretty regimented and he would take ages over their preparation. He would insist on making his own breakfast and lunch, because if I made either of these, my version wouldn't be as perfect and precise as his, and he would freak out. And if his own meals fell short of the perfect mark in any way, he would also go mad. Also, when the anorexia was at its height, Ben couldn't bear any interruptions to meal times, for example if visitors came round, or if I wasn't sitting with him. The slightest problem would cause him to go crazy. Because he had a phobia of fats, his meals were huge while refeeding, imbalanced with far too many carbohydrates. This meant he had to get up at the crack of dawn to prepare his breakfast in time to catch the school bus. As time progressed, the anorexia voice got weaker and Ben's fats phobia diminished. His meals got smaller, with the extra calories made up in fats, oils, nuts, and so on. Plus he wouldn't mind when he ate his meals. Lunch didn't have to be on the dot of 12:30. And as he started to recover from the anorexia, his food rituals ceased. Instead of taking ages over food preparation, he'd whiz up his breakfast in moments and eat it quickly too, without needing the perfect setting and sufficient time to eat his perfect meal. A quick bowl of high-calorie porridge and a couple of thick slices of toast with jam or Nutella, and he was ready to catch the school bus. And he would happily vary it, something anorexia wouldn't have permitted him to do in the bad old days. Also, unlike the bad old days of high anorexia, he no longer spent ages agonising over his body image or hair in front of the mirror. A swift blast with the hairdryer after the shower, and on with the clothes and out the door. Wow, who would have thought it? That's the end of this post, showing that there was progress at this time, and it was very slow. It would take an awful long time, but it was progress, and all progress is good. Thanks for listening. You'll find a link below to my blog, and you'll also find a link to my website where you can download free PDFs of my blog, and also a link to Amazon where you can buy a copy of my book.